Everyone has a story. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. This is Jessop's Journal. Spencer, great to see you again. Time to sign into Jessop's Journal.
Okay.
Hi, this is Doug Jessop. In this episode of Jessop's Journal, I have Spencer Cannon with me. Well, technically, I guess I should call you Sargent Spencer Cannon.
Call me Spencer, that's just fine.
Okay, well, Spencer, we've been doing the social distancing. We did the mask come in and everything. It is time to do the hand sanitizing, with the folks from Five Wives Hand Sanitizing. Yes, they do make adult beverages, and since I got him here, we will say, please remember to drink responsibly, okay? Now, you do not want to get these two mixed up, but the other one is this one. My friends at Clear, and they also make this spry mouth spray. Oh yeah, okay. I think we're ready to get official.
Okay.
So, a lot of people see you on TV and on the media and all that stuff, but you and I met a couple years ago, and you did something really, really special. And I just wanted to kind of follow up on this. And we were talking off camera. It's a little longer than I thought, so time kind of flies. But you are a white guy that is a cop, that has a neighbor that is a black guy that needed a kidney. Fill me in on what happened next.
The only way I looked at that is that I had a friend who needed a kidney. We didn't talk about it much. We communicated, and I knew what his condition was. I knew that he was going downhill. He was at a point where his kidney function was at about 2%. Ooh. I always used to think that people who were undergoing dialysis, that helped them have a better quality of life. And I don't know that I'd characterize it that way. It just helps keep them alive, and it really isn't much quality of life. But he was in dire need, and I was in a position where we ended up being a perfect match, and none of his family members were, and so we did it.
Wow. And his name?
Ed Cameron.
Hey Ed, good to see you again. So give a shout out. So, there's a lot of things that were going on at that time. Not just the kidney stuff, but a lot of I guess you'd call it civil unrest, And I wanted to ask you some questions that might be a little sensitive on that stand front, but okay, so you are a cop, but first and foremost, you're a person. How do you see the interaction between the police and for example, the black community and all that stuff? What's your gut reaction and what's going on around the country?
It makes me sad in a lot of ways, because I think we're probably not making a good enough effort to understand each other. I know what's going on in my mind and the minds of most of the people that I work with, but I don't think we do as good of a job as we can or should do in helping other people to understand what our perspective is and what we really want in the work that we do. We want to help people. We want to make situations better that we get involved in, and we should make judgments about what we do only on facts or evidence or circumstances and not who's involved in them.
I would agree. Now, if I remember right, you served in the military a number of years ago. Is it kind of common for people to go from the military into the police force, or how does that work?
There are a lot of people I work with who have military experience, either former active duty with one of the services, branch of the services, or people who are in the Guard or the Reserve. And they do seem to attract. Law enforcement is quasi-military in nature. There's a very solid command structure with rank and things like that. Of course, even civilian companies and corporations and things like that, they have their command structure, if you will. Oh yeah. But they go by different names.
Right.
When you work for a law enforcement agency, the only thing I usually have to do when I'm in an assignment where I'm wearing a uniform, the only thing I have to do each day is decide if I'm going to wear a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt. Yeah. It does make selecting your wardrobe much easier.
Well, yeah.
And it's the same way in the military. It's depending on what time of year it is, may help determine the uniform you're going to wear. But there is something about that command structure that I think attracts people who have military experience to law enforcement.
Your wife wears a uniform as well.
She does.
A different kind of uniform, but she is, you're what I call a first responder. Tell me a little bit about your wife.
My wife's been a nurse for 38 years. She has worked at the Veterans Hospital in Salt Lake for that entire time, except for the 4 years that we were away when I was on active duty in the Army. She's worked at a number of different assignments up there, but we lived in American Fork for 28 years, and people would say, why don't you work at the American Fork Hospital that's 5 minutes from your house instead of driving all the way to Salt Lake? And she says, it's because I love the vets. Once she gets connected with them, it's just something about serving those who have served and protected us that she loves doing. When she first hired on in 1983, she would occasionally see a World War I vet.
Whoa.
Of course, we don't see those anymore.
No.
But it's a reverent experience when you see somebody who has served, especially those who have encountered circumstances that were very difficult and maybe even life-threatening for them, to recognize that they were willing to do that. So she loves the vets, and that's why she stays there.
So how has COVID impacted, her business? I want business, I guess, but what she's doing?
They like all other healthcare facilities, are taking strict measures to try to protect others from the spread. They've seen the good and the bad in terms of how it has impacted families. They have done some improvements at the hospital up there so that the virus doesn't spread as easily as it might have otherwise with negative pressure rooms and things like that. They switch out scrubs every day.
Wow.
They leave their old ones and take a new set home to wear back to their next shift. They have experiences like a nurse who sits with a man whose family couldn't be there. They were out of state, but they also would not have been allowed to be with him, and just holds his hand because he has nobody there with him while he dies. And so they see those kinds of things, and that's not unique to the VA hospital. Those kinds of things happen everywhere, but yeah, they've been impacted by it just as heavily as other places.
So how about you with with the sheriffs and all the police officers and everything? How is COVID impacting what you guys do?
There are some, we take measures to protect ourselves. We have masks available to our deputies. At a sheriff's office, we have something that police departments don't, and we have a jail that we have to run, and so we have a captive audience, literally. The jail population is much lower than it typically is by several hundred, at least our daily average. But we've had some inmates in the jail contract the virus. We've had some employees who've contracted it. A lot of of the employees that have gotten it, several of them have been outside the facility and in family or friend social interactions that they've had with people. But we have food that we prepare in the jail. The kitchen there prepares over 1,000 meals a day.
Really?
They provide all the meals for Meals on Wheels in Utah County. We have a couple of out facilities where we have a jail industries program, we have work release, we have a nearby treatment center, and they provide the meals for that. So it's critical that they do things to make sure that the ability to prepare those meals for those people and for the inmates in the jail is not compromised. So what they've basically done is they've isolated them in separate housing units, and they have essentially 2 separate crews so that never have contact with each other or have very minimal contact with each other, so that if somebody in one of the crews becomes infected, or heaven forbid multiple people in one group become infected, then the others are still able to work. So they've had to take some significant measures. There are some things that law enforcement gets involved in that you don't have a choice about whether or not you're going to interact with that person. I can choose whether or not I make a traffic stop, and to reduce the likelihood of interaction with a person who might put me at risk, or that I might put them at risk. But if somebody is beating up on a spouse and it's ongoing and it's an active thing and they will not stop when you tell them to, you're going to have to go hands-on. And you don't have time in circumstances like that to ask, are you COVID positive? And you might not even have time to get a mask on, or it might get ripped off in an altercation that you're having. So we have had those kinds of things, and we've had a number of our staff, both in corrections and in enforcement, where they have had to quarantine or isolate because they've had interaction with a person who is COVID positive.
Yeah, because I did do an interview with a prison guard, and it was interesting. He was saying that some of these inmates there actually are okay with going into isolation right now because it's a safer place from COVID. It's like, wow, okay. You obviously see a lot of stuff, and I'll be the first to say I couldn't do your job.
I don't think I could do yours either.
Well, yeah, so I see a lot of the stuff that you do, because now granted, I'm the media guy and you're the person that talks to the media, but, and you talk about all the various accidents or this and that and et cetera. How do you do it? I mean, how do you see some really bad stuff?
Well, we do, and people deal with it differently. For me, the way I deal with it, I try to look at it as something that somebody needs help with, whether it's, we talked about domestic violence, or whether it's somebody who's experienced an overdose, or somebody who's lost, or somebody who has fallen off a cliff, or somebody who has been in a crash, or somebody who has passed away. There's two things we can't do in this world without help, in my opinion. One is being born, and one is dying. And when we had just recently an 81-year-old man who died in a horrific car crash.
Right.
And we got a communication after I put some things on social media about this from his granddaughter, and she humanized him for us, which is something I try to do, but I've never been very good at it, at realizing that beyond the investigation and maybe the immediate circumstances that led up to the investigation, what was this person like? So if you can humanize things, then you tend to be able to work your way through things a little bit more. And if you can recognize that despite the tragic nature of some circumstances that we get involved in, somebody has to be there to help them.
Right.
But we all do need a break from those things. If you just fill your life with those things day after day and you don't do something to decompress, then it can be problematic. And for me, my home is my sanctuary, and and my family. I love the people I work with, and I consider them some of my best friends, but I don't socialize with them outside of work very often, if ever. And it's not because I don't like them, but for me, I like getting together with my barber son and finding out how the cutting hair business is going, or my pilot son and finding out how the flying business is going, or my dispatcher daughter and finding out how the 911 dispatching business is going, or my caretaker daughter or my student daughter, and finding what's going on in your world and showing an interest in them. And it kind of helps me forget something awful that I might have seen. And I think I've gotten pretty good at that. But sometimes I have to do it consciously, or else I dwell on it too much and it starts to hurt.
How long have you been doing this now?
Over 30 years now.
Really? Wow. Without sounding strange, why do you? I mean, what makes Spencer Cannon wake up each morning and say, it's time to get the uniform on and go out there?
I want to help somebody who needs help. Sometimes the help that we provide is not welcome, but it's still needed help. Sometimes the help that we provide is provided to people who don't want to be in that circumstance, some kind of a tragedy, but I want to be there to help people who need it.
Now, talking about tragedy, I was looking at some stats, and I don't know if it's COVID related or what, but can you tell me a little bit more about these suicide stats that we've been seeing here in Utah?
Along about October, the end of September, October in 2020, I started noticing that it seemed like we had been investigating more suicide cases than we usually do. So I had some numbers run from 2010 through 2019, and during that time, just the Utah County Sheriff's Office investigated 120 suicides over a 10-year period, so an average of about 12 per year. Okay. And at the time in October, we've ended 2020 now, and in 2020 we investigated 32 suicides.
Wow.
Which the magnitude of that tragedy it can't be overstated. There are so many resources out there that can help people through this. The National Suicide Hotline, there are local services that are available to help people. We've interacted with a lot of people who are considering self-harm, and we do everything we can to get them resources, to get them help, to make sure that either they're left with a family member who can get them to services, or we have the ability to take people against their will and commit them temporarily for evaluation. We don't like to do that, but if somebody has given strong indication that that's what they're thinking, then we don't hesitate to do that. We haven't done a scientific study on the numbers that I just cited, but you have to think that going from 12 per year to 32 in 1 year is significant, and that it certainly has to be at least somewhat connected to the pandemic that we're all
There's got to be a reason.
Enduring. And we'd like to find a solution to that. There are experts in the field of suicide prevention and services out there that are readily available to anybody. One of the things that sometimes people are afraid to do is when they see somebody who says something, they think, oh, they're not serious. They're just joking. They wouldn't really do that. I've known this person for years. They would never do that. But if you suspect something, ask people. You'd be amazed at how disarming it is to ask a person, are you considering hurting yourself? And look them in the eye and ask them. And when I have done that myself with people that I have found who seemed emotional or upset about something, and I ask them, are you considering hurting yourself? Do you have a plan? Have you made plans to do this? Do you have a method that you're thinking about to take this action? And you can almost see the weight come off their shoulders in almost all situations, because they realize that somebody understands what you're going through, or at least they want to understand what you're going through, and do something to help. And so, yeah, we'll do anything we can, but it's been a real tragedy to see that many people who have thought that they had no other option.
Okay, now you brought up an interesting word, understand. The phrase of my series is called Stories, is Jessop's Journal, Stories Have Power. They help us understand each other. So what's something to help understand with the first responding and the police community out to the rest of the people around the country watching this? What's something that you would want people to know that they may not know about, somebody that's wearing a badge?
We care about the people we interact with. I don't think people see us that way largely. And I'll give you an example. In 2009, there was a guy by the name of John Jones, you may be familiar with, who died in Nutty Putty Cave. That is by far the single most impactful incident that I've been involved in. It is the single most difficult press briefing I've ever had to do. It started about 9 o'clock one evening, and the next it went for 27 hours, and we have a man, for those who don't know, he was in a cave in a space that was about 18 inches wide and about 10 inches high at an angle of about 70 degrees offset with head down. And the space that he was stuck in was about the same amount of space that the rescuers had to work in to free him. And over 27 hours, they were unable to do that, and he died. And when I had to tell that piece of information to the media, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my work. Simply because when search and rescue and EMS in general shows up, they make things better. They're fixers. When they get there, they don't very often see things end up worse than they started, and they certainly, if they have a person who's alive at the beginning, they're almost always alive at the end. But here's a guy who was alive and perfectly healthy at the beginning, and 27 hours later he died. And he had a young wife and a child, and he was a medical student in Virginia. And that was probably the single most difficult experience I had professionally in having to not only just see what happened to him and imagine the circumstances he was in, but also the circumstances that his family was experiencing, knowing that he wasn't coming out.
Yeah.
And he never did. They ended up leaving him there and making that his final resting place.
Wow. Well, there's something that, that I like to ask everybody, okay? Rustico makes my journals. It's Jessop's journal. You gotta have a journal, right? Okay. My journal's got all kinds of scars and all kinds of stuff on it. Well, they made one for you. Yours is nice and new, okay?
Very nice, thank you.
And they've got a hashtag. It's called Leave Your Mark. So, broadcast voice ready? Yes, Spencer Cannon. Spencer, how do you want to leave your mark?
When I leave my house for work every day, I just say a little prayer. And that prayer is just, Heavenly Father, help me find somebody today who needs me. When I find somebody who needs me, I hope that I will be known for making situations that I get involved in better than they were when I got there. We get involved in some situations that are maybe some of the worst situations that people will ever in their lives be involved with. And I want to do what I can to make that situation better for them and everybody involved. And I hope that people can look at me and say, yeah, he did make situations better after he was done.
Well, thank you very much for your service. And thank you very much for coming on Jessop's Journal. There's a couple other people we need to thank. The hand sanitizing with the 5 wives, okay? Don't forget to drink responsibly. You wash your hands, but totally serious, Spencer. Have you ever thought about washing, not kidding, your nose, okay?
Never have.
Okay, clear nasal spray, great stuff. Washes away all kinds of bacteria and everything. Kind of important right now. Of course, the folks at Rustico. And then Taylor Cooperative tries to make me look good, with the clothes. But, and of course, JW Custom Hats. Here's the thing I want people to remember. Stories have power. They help us understand each other. And people like this guy, Spencer Cannon. With another entry into Jessop's Journal, I'm Doug Jessop, ABC4 News.